Hi everyone, Sid here in the car driving to work. My dash mount was failing miserably yesterday, but it's up and running and we're on track. So today I don't think it's going to be a particularly long video, but I was reading something and I'll put a little context very shortly. You know what? How about now? So just to give you an idea, my reading strategy for the past year or so has been the following, because my to-read list is growing faster than I can knock books out, to be honest. Look, it's constantly growing. And there are these two works that were written relatively at the same time or during the same period that have been on my to-read list for a while. I started one of them. So basically my strategy has been, I will read a book, and then I will read one or two chapters from Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. And then after that, I will read one or two Federalist Papers. I've added that to the rotation. And then once I've read those one or two Federalist Papers, then I'll start my next book, which is what happened now. However, Friday, I was reading the Federalist Federalist numbers, I believe it's 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. I think it was Federalist 3 and 4, written by John Jay, where he was exploring the alternatives of whether the people within a geographic area are overall safer under one federal army or under many state armies or a couple federations of armies. And the funny thing is, I was reading this and his argument is actually sound. The logic is valid. However, there's a fault in one of the premises that he pours into that logic, which I will get to shortly. So the long and short of his argument is that by picking from a larger pool of people, we will have even wiser people at the top of our government than we would if there were separate little pools of people, because the wisest person in that collective would only end up in at the head of his or her little pool, back then probably his, and with regards to a bunch of other like subpar people being at the top of their pools. So I was reading this, and the details aren't really that relevant, but the fact of the matter is, as I was reading this, I kept thinking, like, by that logic, a one world government is the best possibility. And I don't know if John Jay realizes this or not. He was a Freemason, so who knows? You know, there are a bunch of theories out there about Freemasonry and one world governments. So maybe he was, in a sly way, arguing in favor of one world government. However, the bottom line is, when I was reading this, I'm like, whether he knows this or not, he's arguing in favor of one world government, because the larger the pool of let's call it human resources for now. So the larger the pool of resources you have to choose from, the higher the quality of the resource that you will pull from that pool, assuming that quality is what you're actively and accurately looking for. Now, to step away from my current thread, to jump into the big problem with that logic, which is sound. However, and I don't know if John Jay realized this at the time, but you can replace the word wise with any other adjective and the logic still holds. So by picking from a larger pool of people, the most greedy, the greediest, most vile, most sociopathic people will end up at the top if you can use sociopathy and greed and vile to move up that ladder. So yes, the logic is true. However, the faulty premise is that the priority for the selection of the person in charge of an organization, for instance, would be wisdom, and that selection would be accurately used to select that person, because again, sociopaths have enormous interest in passing themselves off as normal people. So you really need to be on your guard, and that is why in a system, and I think it's obvious. I've covered this before in my video on the good, the bad, the ugly, and the unnecessary. I'll link to it below. But the bottom line is, if you have a larger pool of people and the mechanism that we're talking about provides a platform for sociopaths to gain power, then the most sociopathic will gain power in that pool. So the logical conclusion, and that's the thing, it is because of the failings of humanity, the failings of the human condition, that I'm an anarchist. It is because of the greed and the self-centeredness that exists within many of us. I don't think most of us, but many of us, that I'm an anarchist, because it is because of those things that we cannot have a state. So to tie it into my previous rant is the only two logical conclusions are a one world government or no government. And I was thinking that in the subway on Friday. I was reading this, and I made a connection that turned me into one of those guys staring off into space, like as he just made a connection. There's a meme about a guy like in a party with that look on his face. That was me for a couple minutes in the subway on Friday, and I made a connection between that logic of either one world government or no government with given the state of things, and I connected it to another topic which is often talked about in relationship with governments in general, which is God. I think that as I've mentioned on this channel before, I'm a pantheist. However, I am familiar with the arguments of rational empiricism. So I am quite familiar with how the logical conclusion under rational empiricism is atheism. There's no way around it. I am still a pantheist. However, I accept that it's kind of a superstition of mine, and I'm okay with it. I basically, for the most part, live my day-to-day life as an atheist. I think the inner world is where a lot of those differences come in. However, this whole, the Abrahamists in general, which is my catch-all term for Jews, Muslims, and Christians, Abrahamists in general, a lot of them have this anthropomorphized God who rules over us, and that is why when I meet an Abrahamist in general, one of the first questions I'll ask this person is God one with His creation? And that is my way of kind of sneakily asking, do you accept the possibility of pantheism? And if that person says no, then I know that there won't be many opportunities for connection on a spiritual level, because I was raised Catholic. So if the person's answer is yes, I can at least use the language to kind of talk about the same ideas with this person. From my very, very little experience, people who, Christians in particular, who answer yes to that question, that God is one with His creation, a lot of them don't believe in hell, which is good. But I went off on a tangent there. I just want to finish my thing. I realized being familiar with the arguments of rational empiricism, I am quite familiar that the the key in my pantheist position relies on consciousness existing independent of brain cells. And for that, I'm totally aware that there's absolutely zero evidence. I get that. However, I believe that, kind of like John Jay in his day with his logic, the knowledge does exist where you can actually take a position and actually push your logic to its full conclusion, which is why Abrahamists, well, okay, let me specify. The Abrahamists who believe that there's this circle within the universe that is God, and everything outside of that circle that's in the universe is non-God. Those people really annoy me. And agnostics also annoy me. A nickname that I have for agnostics is cowardly atheists, because they live their day-to-day lives as fucking atheists. They don't pray to God just in case, you don't know, maybe I'll go to every church just in case. They don't do that. They live their lives as atheists, but they're like, oh, I don't know. Yes, you do know. Do some fucking research, take a fucking position. However, if you do that research, push your logic to its full conclusion, no matter where it takes you, which is why John Jay in his day, whether he knew about it or not, he was arguing in favor of one world government. And someone pointing out the things that I just pointed out, how you replace wisdom with any other human trait, and the logic still holds, would be arguing in favor of anarchism, as I'm assuming Lysander Spooner did. However, I am not familiar with his works. I haven't read No Treason. That is one of the books on my to read list that I will eventually get around to. However, yeah, like we do have the knowledge, and it's all about fucking claiming that knowledge and pushing your logic to its full conclusion, which is what I do. So I think that wraps it up. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments or questions or observations, please leave a comment below. Please like and share this video. And if you subscribe to me on my YouTube channel, that would help me out a lot. You have no idea how much wind it puts in my sails when I see that. As well as interaction in general, likes and shares and comments is also great. So thank you very much for watching. You'll find links to my social media below, and I will see you soon. You take care.